A lot can happen in a week. Some of it good, some of it bad, some of it downright ugly. When faced with intriguing developments in the week's news, we turn to a rotating panel of non-experts to parse the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. On today's panel, Jennifer Hedaya, Executive Director of Air Alliance Houston, Marco Roberts, Chairman of the Texas Conservative Liberty Forum, and Marcus Davis, owner of the Breakfast Club restaurant. Jennifer, Marco, Marcus, welcome to Houston Matters.
Good morning.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Panel, the Texas Senate late Tuesday passed a bill that would allow teachers to pray or engage in religious speech in the classroom. As Houston Public Media's Andrew Schneider reported this week, it's the latest effort by Texas Republicans to use a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision to expand the role of religion in public schools. SB 965 joins other bills passed by the Senate awaiting consideration in the House, which would also require the Ten Commandments to be displayed in every public school classroom and allow for prayer or Bible readings during the school day. Proponents of such bills argue a 2022 Supreme Court decision allowing a high school football coach to pray on the field during and after games opens the door for such legislation. Opponents say the bills represent religious coercion against a captive audience. No word on when or whether the Texas House will take up the bills, but even if they pass, they seem likely to face court challenges. The state Senate says, give me some of that old-time religion in public school classrooms. Is this good, bad, or ugly? Jen?
Well, I'm going to go right out there and call this ugly. Ugly because I think it's a deliberate attempt to stir controversy by poking at people's very deeply held personal beliefs around faith and free speech and then plopping it all down in the most objectively controversial setting of this entire legislative session so far, the public school system. To make matters worse, the bill itself is exactly 20 lines long. It's a page. Contains virtually no details, and fails to define the terms that are at the heart of the matter, such as what it means for an educator to, quote, be on duty, or even what is religious speech. And to be fair, there was an amendment introduced that would have brought clarity to the bill by excluding instructional time, but that amendment failed. And that might be the clearest window into what this bill was intended to be. So if this were a codification of the Supreme Court ruling, then the amendment would have passed because that's what the ruling said. But truly, if that were the case, I don't think the bill would have needed to be introduced at all. We have constitutional law, labor law, EEOC that all protect against religious discrimination in the workplace. So for me, this is at best intended to stir controversy. And at worst, I might agree with some of the critics that it's a veiled attempt to force religious speech onto other people in the public school system that wouldn't have a say if the bill passed, namely students and their families. So for me, I think it's messy. I think it's ugly. I think it's just there for controversy.
Okay, good, bad, or ugly? Marco Roberts.
I don't know that actually makes that much of a difference. So, I mean, I don't think it's bad, but I wouldn't go as far as saying it's good only because looking at the bill as I was pointed out here, it's not very long. It's very brief. It looks to me like nothing more than a restatement of what's already been decided by Kennedy versus Bremerton. I agree, it's vague, but that just means that it's going to, I just don't see any direction in this law that changes anything really. I don't think it's intended to divide people, but I do think a lot of people in this country feel besieged. There's that sort of sentiment, and so this is sort of a reaction to that. But I also have to tell people, things have changed, and I think they may imagine that this is a almost entirely Christian country as it was maybe 50 years ago, or 90% of folks identified as Christian. That's down to the 50s. It's a big change. And they may not be anticipating that this law would apply just as much to a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu, and they may be surprised by that application. So I always tell people, be careful what you're asking for if this is really what you want. But in general, it's true that there's been kind of a pushback in terms of saying I can't, like the whole thing where with the football coach who was praying and they were trying to stop him from doing that. Clearly, that was an example of we all agreed that was going too far. People should be allowed to make their own praise if they want to. Then there is the issue of the captive audience, as people say. This leaves it all open, but again, the First Amendment is what rules in this case, so I'm not particularly worried. And again, I do think that perhaps we'll be making more room for Muslims and Buddhists and others to actually exercise their own religion, because for a lot of people of faith, especially some of these other religions, they're instructed to bring their faith into everything they do. Now, obviously, you have to be careful when you're in schools what that means by that. But in my opinion, if it makes it more possible for a Christian or Muslim or a Jew to engage in their faith at school without imposing it on other people, then I don't see any problem with it.
Okay, good, bad, or ugly? Marcus Davis.
I think this is as just about as ugly as it can get, simply because, and Marco, I hear and agree with your sentiment of if this provides a space and opportunity for the Muslim, the Buddhist to practice their faith, then this is great. I also agree, be careful what you wish for. We have a religious bias in this nation. We have a religious bias towards Christianity in this nation. This rule is not being put in place for anything other than Christians. And while, yes, the First Amendment will hopefully protect, I believe that this is an attempt to go in a certain direction that will bode only in favor of Christianity. The coach praying on the sideline or after the game, yes, he does have a right to do that. He is entitled. And I agree that a person should be able to practice their faith. But I can promise you, the minute that someone of the Muslim faith stands up in front of their classroom and begins to quote the Quran or pray in Arabic, the parents, the school, this body that's passing this law will have an issue with that. We have a religious bias in this nation, and I think this is an attempt, in my opinion, to prop up the faltering numbers of Christianity. I think this is an effort to raise Christianity higher than it is because the numbers are failing. I don't see anything beautiful coming out of it. I hope that this would be a place of freedom. But we live in a nation, in a city where we just had a school outing where we're afraid to say it was because of the end of Ramadan, right? We don't acknowledge certain things. We live, I don't know if you guys saw the rant that occurred with the ex-husband of the congressperson, where a person was told to go back to their country because they were wearing the Muslim headgear. I don't see this as a true and genuine, authentic effort to expand religious freedoms. I see it as a ploy to minimize religious freedoms. That's my opinion.
Well, I think people ought to know, and of course it does include that there's two parts of this bill that are both kind of vague, right? One says you can pray, and one says, but it also can be restricted for compelling state interest, also vague. And so it's got both elements in there. That's why I'm saying I'm not thinking that this bill does much of anything. I think it's more symbolic, in my opinion. But perhaps it would have been better if the amendment had passed and outlined that. But in general, I'm not concerned that I think this is going to be resolved correctly in the end. I don't think it has a chance. I don't think it's going to pass. But even if it does, I think it's healthy to have this discussion. And perhaps as we move about this, because we are becoming a more increasingly diverse country with more people from other religions, that we do start talking a little bit more, what is the appropriate? Because a lot of those folks are going to want to bring their religion into the schools because they're used to doing that in their own countries. And so maybe we should talk more about how do we do that in a way that protects people's individual rights to live their life in their faith that they want to, without, at the same time, as we all recognize, not imposing that faith on other people. You talk about the example of a Muslim getting in front of the class and praying in front of everybody. Well, obviously, I think that's kind of an imposition, right? But would that be the same thing if he's praying quietly at his desk before he starts his class? Then I would have no objection because that's what he's...
Oh, right. And that part I get. But I think that this will... Because there's a part in there that talks about encouraging or allowing instructors to encourage their particular faith, if I read that correctly.
Yes, I don't think that's in the bill.
Yeah, the bill doesn't encourage the promotion of a faith, but it prohibits negative actions taken against an educator that prays or shares religious speech. But again, the vagueness of the bill doesn't say when that can happen.
And in my opinion, that's promoting.
It's allowing that to happen within the instructional day.
Right.
I'm struck. I had a high school civics teacher who was fond of saying routinely that your rights stop where another person's rights start.
I learned that too.
Yeah.
We went to the same elementary school, apparently.
Yeah. And it strikes me how often the conversations we have on this program really boil down to that there is something going on that somebody wants to pass, somebody wants to move on some policy, something, and it really comes down to, okay, well, this will support the rights of Party A, but it will cause a problem for the rights of Party B, and your rights stop where another one starts, so can we do this?
And I think one piece to that is, have we forgotten that young people in an educational setting also have that same set of rights? And it feels as though political ideology is being imposed within the school day, within the public school setting, and forgetting that those students and their families have rights just as much as that teacher does as well. So yes, that's exactly how someone explains civil liberties to me.
Well, I think it's a good point. I think that's the ideal. But then, of course, in reality, what we know, the reality is that sometimes our rights are at tension with each other, right? There's a balance we have to strike. And, we want to think there's a perfect answer, but it's going to be a judgment call.
My favorite ones are the Supreme Court cases where they are trying to decide between one person's First Amendment right and another person's First Amendment right.
Exactly, which does happen.
Sometimes different clauses, sometimes the same clause.
Right. And to go back to the point that I was making about why I believe this is an attempt, even if it's just showmanship, right? I still believe it's an attempt to prop up one religion over the other, because as this bill joins another bill that would require schools to post the Ten Commandments and promote reading of the Bible. They're not putting up bills that will require other tenets from other and books from other religions. It's only about Christianity, and that's why I believe this is going down a rabbit hole.
Well, I mean, there are other bills, and I don't know. I know they touch on that, and I think it does matter how they're worded. I would just simply say that it all depends on the context, right? Like we'd have the picture of Moses at the Supreme Court building, but the context is, what's the context, right? Is this about Judaism, or is it about writing laws? And of course, in that context, it's okay because the Supreme Court says, well, in this context, we're talking about law giving. If we're talking about quoting the Quran or the Bible or any other scripture, if you're talking about the history of a region, well, then that seems appropriate. Some of this seems common sense to me. I realize that there will be people who will try to take advantage of that. But again, I think that the Supreme Court has spoken on this repeatedly, which is the context of, are you talking about proselytizing, or you're talking simply about eliminating historical
the context of the one bill that Marcus was pointing out is every single public school classroom. So they might be teaching math.
That was going to be my point. The context is the public school setting.
Right.
This is not the context of a class on faith. This is not a church. This is not even...
And that bill's already passed in the Senate.
The context is within the school day of teaching our students what they need to know to pass tests and have, productive lives in reading, math, art, STEM. It's not a faith-based class.
Well, exactly, which is why I say be careful what you ask for, because as soon as... And this is why I don't think they're going to go through, because a lot legislators are aware. I mean, our organization is making them aware of that. And basically it's saying, just be aware that once you cross this line, the Quran is now also within the same law, can be asked to be put in that same place. Is that what you're asking for? I can tell you a lot of people are not thinking this way. They're not considering how this applies.
I think that you're correct. There are some that are not thinking that, but I think that there are those that are thinking that, and they're thinking it from a bullish standpoint. They're saying it doesn't matter. When it comes time to stomp that out, we'll stomp that out. That's just what I chuckled earlier because you said something hilarious. You said common sense in the same sentence as legislators.
Panel, the Port of Galveston's pursuing an alternative cruise line to replace Princess Cruises, which announced last week it's dropping future plans for a slate of cruises from the island. Port of Galveston Director and CEO Roger Reese tells the Cron that the port's begun talks with an unnamed alternate cruise line while leaving the door open for Princess to return. The cruise line may be best known as the home of the Love Boat or for its ad campaign featuring Ted Lasso actor Hannah Waddingham. What it apparently won't be known for, according to Cruise Industry News, is the now shuttered 17 cruises that were to leave Galveston between November of next year and March of 2027. But one of its boats, the Regal Princess, will still launch out of Galveston from this October through March 2026. The Port of Galveston says, nothing to see here. We're moving on after Princess Cruises announces it's sailing away. Is this good, bad, or ugly? Marco?
Well, I mean, it's hard to position anyone sailing away as a good thing and not coming back because, it's hard to position that as, oh, this is wonderful because, why are they leaving? Reading the story, I couldn't get any details as to why. There was nothing in there, but there's something, so it's kind of like, well, something they don't want here. I don't know what it could be. So it doesn't sound good. I do think, though, that it's kind of far into the future. They mentioned that it's not a big part of their business. It did get my attention to the one other thing about Galveston, though, really kind of a different picture, because it's a major port, right? I didn't realize it was the fourth busiest port in the country for cruises. Number one outside of Florida because the other three are in Florida, right? I didn't know that. But here's what's interesting. Why does this not make Galveston grow? I mean, Galveston peaked in population around 1960 and has been going down ever since, right? And so all this business, what is it about Galveston that is causing this city to just continue to shrink?
Extreme weather.
You think that's what it is?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh, not the topic, Craig. Sorry.
Oh, no, okay. That's all right. Maybe, I don't know. But, it peaked in 60. Actually, a lot of cities, a lot of inner cities, but some didn't. Some continued to grow, but other cities did not. Like Houston continued to grow, but Galveston did not. It makes me think, it just goes to show that sometimes I would hope that the port of Galveston, as busy as it is, would be leveraged by the city into becoming a much more, because the population of the United States has gone up by almost triple in that same time.
I imagine that they certainly have a lot of tourists who, before they hop on those cruise ships, will spend a day at the Strand and that sort of thing. So I'm sure there's some of that going on.
Yes, but I do wonder. It makes me wonder, why are people not actually leaving? There's something that's not working for the city, in my opinion.
Not the topic, but the story of Galveston in 1900, which was poised to be the city and not Houston, was leveled in the face of a massive hurricane and flood. So I think it is.
And the innovation of Houston creating its own port.
That's true, but the city did continue to grow for the next 60 years. So that is, yes, it did stop that, but it basically went, from around 10, 15,000 people to almost 70,000 by 1960. So it continued to grow. Something changed after that.
Princess Cruises, good, bad, or ugly, Marcus.
Let me just say it. Port of Galveston, I did know the strength of the Port of Galveston. I'm in the tourism business, and so I know how much tourism comes to Houston to go to Galveston to take the cruises. I see them week in and week out at the peak of cruise season. Farewell to Princess. It's their loss. We've got a great port here that I'm certain that other cruise lines are ready, willing, and able to join us, or maybe the ones that are there will expand there. If it's a loss, yes, that would be ugly if it's not replaced. But I'm confident because of the attraction that Galveston has, and Houston has, they won't have a problem finding someone. So I'm excited for the next version, the next cruise line that will sign up to grace the shores of Galveston, the Port of Galveston. Yes.
All right, good, bad, or ugly, Jen.
I promise to keep on topic. Because this is exactly the kind of topic that fills me with warm and fuzzies that I love coming on your show for, Craig. So I used to love The Love Boat. This is where I'm starting on this one. It was must-see TV for me on Saturday nights, followed by another 80s TV gem called Fantasy Island.
Yes.
So
that was Galveston.
Was it?
No, I'm just kidding.
My God.
Yes,
So-
Mr. Rourke lived around the corner.
That would have been fabulous. So I truly remember the first time I saw the Hannah Waddingham ad, and I was filled with the same rush of nostalgic feelings. And I believe the term that's been associated in regards to this ad is something called nostalgia, which is a modern twist on an old guilty pleasure. And in general, I think that term perfectly sums up the moment I think cruising is having right now. So remember, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we heard stories about cruise ships stranded for days, unable to dock. We've all heard stories about the frankly disgusting infectious disease outbreaks that have on cruise ships. But now we're starting to see a resurgence of some romanticism around cruising and a little bit of salaciousness and drama. So there's a reality show about the staff of a luxury cruise line. There's a new show about a cruise ship doctor that's doing very well. And now, of course, Rebecca from Ted Lasso is out cruising. So for Princess Cruises to cancel these departures right now, for us, I think is bad. We need our limitless French fry buffets and massages and dolphin sightings and all the things that Hannah is experiencing in that ad now more than ever. Bad for business, bad for nostalgia, and bad for Love Boat aficionados like me.
What makes you know that they canceled versus being canceled?
Well, we heard in the story they canceled 17 departures.
I know, but
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is what makes you know that Princess, that the Galveston didn't want this? Hey, it's time for us to move on.
Oh, that
that
Galveston said, please leave.
There's a greater opportunity.
Please, we don't want your business.
Yeah, that
I'm
sounds
not sure about
I
that.
don't
Versus
know.
Princess saying, we're taking our business somewhere else.
What makes you know this isn't the case of the New York Giants getting rid
You know,
of
he's just being
rid of-
optimistic.
getting rid of Saquon Barkley, and then the Philadelphia Eagles picking him up and going to the Super Bowl.
They ought to hire you at the Port Authority over there. They should.
Can you not tell I'm auditioning to be a spokesman?
All
That's
right.
what-
I'm sorry to say, Jen has to catch a cruise ship, so
Oh,
we're going to
I
wrap it here.
do. I do.
Jennifer,
Are you really
Hidayat-
going on a cruise?
No, I love cruises, though. I would do that. Hannah Waddingham, call me.
Jennifer Hidayat is Executive Director of Air Alliance Houston. Marco Roberts is Chairman of the Texas Conservative Liberty Forum. And Marcus Davis owns the Breakfast Club restaurant. Jennifer, Marco, Marcus, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Craig.
you.
Soon we'll be making another run. The love boat promises something for it.